The whole kingdom knows me as the joke, the live-in husband of the Sioux clan, the nobody who married up into a family of monsters and brings nothing to the table but a pulse. And here's the part that took me a while to appreciate. They're completely right. I am the joke. What none of them know, not the elders, not the rivals, not even my own terrifying wife, is that the joke is going to cultivate off her heart. Every time that woman feels one true thing about me, I get stronger, and it turns out a little harder for her to look away from. That's the part that ruins her eventually. The colder she plays it, the more she can't stop her eyes from drifting back to the husband she's supposed to despise. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The trouble on day one is she's spent years feeling exactly nothing. So let me start at the beginning, the morning I woke up in the worst seat in the kingdom. 2 days ago, I was a divorce lawyer. That was the whole job, back in a world with traffic lights and instant noodles. People who used to love each other sat across a table from me, and I found the one clause that decided who walked away with what. I was good at it. Reading a room is a skill. Who's lying, who's bluffing, where the soft spot is. Then I pulled a stupid all-nighter on a settlement, put my head down on the desk for 1 minute, and woke up somewhere with no traffic lights at all. I woke up as Jiang Mu. The body came with a free starter pack of memories, and let me tell you, I'd have asked for a refund. 26 years old. Married 8 years into the Sioux clan as a live-in husband, which I learned fast, is the single lowest rung a man can occupy in this world. You don't marry a woman here. If you've got no name and no power, you marry into her family, you take their roof, you eat their rice, and everyone gets to treat you like furniture that occasionally needs feeding. Jiang Mu had been doing it for 8 years. 8 years of bowing, of yes, elder, of eating last and standing in the back. The man had the spine of a wet napkin, and the moment his life hit rock bottom, he apparently checked out and left the lease to me. Thanks for that. So that's where I am, a place called Cloudfall City, in a kingdom called Yunju, in a world where the only thing anyone respects is strength. And by strength they mean cultivation, Kai, realms, the whole ladder. I had it memorized by the end of my first day from listening to servants gossip. Body temper at the bottom, then Kai Si, pillar, gold core, nascent, spirit sovereign, and Tao ascendant at the top, where people stop being people and start being legends who can split a mountain because they are in a bad mood. Each realm has its stages. Most folks claw their way up over decades, swallowing pills that cost more than a house, and die somewhere around the middle wondering where their life went. And me. I checked, the body had a cultivation level 2. Body temper, the very bottom. Not even the bottom of the ladder, the dirt the ladder is standing in. 26 years old, and weaker than the kid who swept the courtyard. In a world that worships power, I was a rounding error. But here's the thing they kept whispering about, the name that made even the sour-faced elders lower their voices. The Sioux clan wasn't a joke. The Sioux clan was terrifying, and the reason was a single person, my wife, Sue Wonking. I hadn't even seen her yet on that first morning, and I already knew the legend because the whole city ran on it. 22 years old, a sword cultivator, a once-in-3 generations genius who'd hit gold core before 25, a realm most people don't sniff in a full lifetime. They called her the frost flower of Cloudfall, which sounds like a tea, but apparently meant beautiful enough to stop your heart and strong enough to stop it permanently. She'd carried the Sioux clan on her back since her father died. And on his deathbed, that father, the old clan head, had made one last, baffling request, that his daughter honor an old debt and marry the Jiang boy. Nobody knew why. The leading theory was that the old man had gone soft in the head at the end. Marriage had been a humiliation for the Sioux clan from day one, a stain they tolerated only because you don't break a dead patriarch's word lightly in a world this superstitious. So they kept the husband, and they made sure he knew, every single day, exactly how little he was worth. By midday, I'd been shoved by a cousin, ignored by 3 servants, and handed a list of chores by an elder who didn't bother to learn my face. By evening, I understood the shape of my new life completely, and I'll be honest, the divorce lawyer in me was almost impressed. It was a perfect little trap. No standing, no power, no allies, married to a woman several realms and one entire universe of class above me, in a clan that wanted me gone. If I'd had a client in this position, I'd have told them to settle and run, except I didn't get the option to run. Because that evening they threw a banquet, and the banquet was the trap closing. I should mention, somewhere around noon, while I was hauling water like the kingdom's most overqualified servant, a voice had spoken inside my head. Hearthbond system bound, welcome host. A soft gold panel hanging in the air just for me. Nobody else so much as blinked. Host Jiamu realm, body temper devotion, 0 boons, 0. Bond Suwonking regard, 0%. I'd read enough of these stories at 3 in the morning to know the shape of it. A system, a cheat. The thing that turns the loser into the legend. So naturally, I did what any sensible man would do, and demanded my signing bonus. Okay, I'd muttered into the well. Starter pack, beginner's gift. A pill, a technique, a sack of gold, anything. Every system gives the main character a welcome present. No active rewards. You advance through your wife's genuine regard. I'd stared at that little frost blue meter sitting flat on 0. Through her regard, you bound to a man whose wife has never once looked directly at him, and your idea of a cheat is, what? A relationship tracker. Each true milestone she feels toward you pays devotion and a boon. The payout scales with her realm. And that was the part I'd turned over all afternoon while I carried water and got shoved by cousins. Because she was gold core, several realms above me. And if a real feeling from a woman that powerful paid out scaled to her level, then this wasn't a tip jar. It was the richest vein in the world, locked behind the one thing I couldn't fake, steal, or lawyer my way into. An ice-cold genius actually, genuinely caring whether I lived or died. The system was very clear about the genuine part. It read her, not me. Flattery paid nothing. Coercion paid nothing. I could grovel for a year, and the meter wouldn't twitch. So I had the greatest cheat in the world and absolutely no way to use it, because step 1 was make the frost flower of Cloudfall fall for the family doormat. And I was on day 1, and the meter said 0, and they were about to divorce me at dinner. The banquet hall was the nicest room I'd been allowed into, which is to say I was allowed to stand at the edge of it. Silk everywhere, 100 relatives and guests, and at the head of the room, finally her. The legend had undersold it. Su Wonking sat at the high seat like a sword someone had laid across a table, perfectly still, perfectly composed, the kind of stillness that makes a room organize itself around you. Silver-black hair past her waist, skin like the first snow of the year, eyes the pale gray of a cold morning, looking at everything and warming to nothing. Deep blue robes, a white sash, and a slender longsword resting against her chair with a faint sheen of frost along the edge, like a pet that could end the world if it got bored. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at anyone. She looked the way a mountain looks at the weather. And my idiot heart, well, Jiang Mu's heart, but I was driving now, did a thing it had no business doing for a stranger who'd be free of me by dessert. Don't, I told myself. She is a gold core sword saint, and you are a man whose entire net worth is one borrowed body and a system that judges your love life. Focus. Aunt Sulan focused it for me. She was an elder, plum-colored robes, jade pins, a smile like a paper cut. She stood, and the hall hushed, and she had a servant lay a document on the floor at my feet, because of course she made me read it on the floor. Brother's dying wish has shamed this clan long enough, she announced, warm as a winter pond. 8 years we have fed this guest. Tonight we set our wonking free of him. Jiang Mu, sign the annulment and go. And I looked down at the paper, and the divorce lawyer woke all the way up, because I had read 10,000 of these, and this one was sloppy. No, I said, and stood, and the hall went quiet the way a room does when the furniture clears its throat. This annulment's void, I said, and I let the old courtroom voice come up out of this borrowed chest, calm, almost bored, the voice you use when you already know you've won. Su clan law. A union sealed by a clan head's death vow can be dissolved by exactly 2 people. The clan head who sealed it, who is dead, or the bonded heir herself of her own free word, spoken in open hall. Not an elder, not a proxy. You don't have the authority to end this marriage, Aunt Sulan. You're asking me to sign a document you legally cannot issue. I let the pause stretch, the way you do right before the knife. Which makes it a forged clan head decree. And I'm fairly sure I don't have to tell you what the penalty for forging the old head seal is in this family. Sulan's face went the exact color of her robes, and the whole hall slowly turned to look at the one person who actually could end it. The one person who hadn't said a word. Su Wonking looked at me, not through me, at me. For the first time in 8 years of this body's memory, those cold gray eyes actually landed on my face, and there was something in them I hadn't earned and didn't expect. Not warmth, nothing as generous as that, but a flicker of something sharp and reassessing, the look you give a chair when it turns out the chair can talk, and what it said was correct. "Is he wrong, Aunt?" she asked. Quiet, even. It went through the hall like the edge of that frost-bright sword. "Is the decree forged?" Sulan opened her mouth. Closed it, that was answer enough. Wonking stood, and 100 cultivators flinched at the sound of her chair. "Then there is nothing to sign," she said. "My father's word stands until I end it. And I have not." She paused. Her gaze came back to me, one heartbeat longer than it needed to, that small line appearing between her brows like she was filing me under a new heading. "Sit, husband, before someone helps you down." It wasn't kindness. It barely cleared the bar of civility. But it was real, the first true thing that woman had ever sent in my direction instead of past it, and the system rang like a struck bell behind my eyes. Milestone, first honest regard from Su Wonking. Regard, 0% to 4%. +1 boon plus 12 devotion. Boon withheld, bond too new to channel, stored. 4%, a trickle not a flood. The system wouldn't even hand over the boon yet. Bond too new, it said, like a bank holding a transfer. But I felt the 4%. A thin thread of warmth uncurled somewhere under my ribs. The first kai this borrowed body had ever held that didn't belong to a chore. It wasn't a realm jump. It wasn't a montage. It was a single coin dropped into an empty jar. And then a second panel slid up under the first, and this one I had not read about at 3 in the morning. Devotion refines the vessel. The bloom tier 1. It's hard to describe what that felt like from the inside because it was small, but it was the kind of small you feel in your spine. The slump this body had worn for 8 years eased a half-inch out of my shoulders. The tired gray around my eyes lifted, just slightly, like someone had wiped a film off a window. My jaw sat different. I didn't get handsome in a thunderclap, I got clearer, the way a smudged photo gets clearer. A man you'd have walked past became, very faintly, a man you might look at twice. I know how that sounds. Believe me, I sat there in my doormat clothes, thinking the cheat for the most powerful woman in the kingdom is a glow-up. But then I clocked the catch, and the catch was beautiful. I could hide my cultivation. I fully intended to. A live-in husband who suddenly has kai gets a knife. But this wasn't kai. This was just a man slowly looking like himself. There's no law against eating well and standing up straight. I could not hide it if I tried, and I realized, with the slow grin of a lawyer who's just found the loophole in his own contract, that I didn't want to. Because across the hall, Su Wonking's gaze, already turned away, already a mountain regarding the weather, came back. Just for a beat. Just a flick, the kind of glance you don't decide to make. She looked at the husband she'd been ignoring for 8 years, and a small line appeared between her brows, the expression of someone who has walked past a painting 1,000 times and only now noticed it's been moved. She caught herself doing it. I watched her catch herself, saw the cold pour back over her face on purpose, saw her stare very deliberately at the far wall like the far wall had insulted her. The meter behind my eyes ticked. Not a milestone, just a flicker, but it ticked. Oh, I thought, and kept my doormat face nailed on, while something entirely undoormat happened behind it. Oh, this is going to be fun. But I'd spent a career listening to the sound a thing makes, and that coin hit the bottom and rang like there was room for a fortune. 4% for one cold sentence she half regretted. I sat there with my doormat face on and did the arithmetic that would run the rest of my life. If 4 was a coin, what was 40? What was a smile? What was the day a woman like that actually, against every law of sense, chose me? So I'm telling no one, obviously. A live-in husband who suddenly starts cultivating doesn't get congratulations in a world like this. He gets a cage and a feeding schedule or a quiet knife. The doormat's smile stays welded on. Let them keep the joke. The joke is the disguise. The banquet stitched itself back together around me, the elders pretending the last 2 minutes hadn't happened, and I kept my eyes down and watched the little meter instead. 4%. And beneath it, something new the system hadn't bothered to announce. A hair-thin line of warm light I could just see if I looked sideways, running from my chest across the hall to where she sat. A thread, nobody else could see it. She couldn't see it. And next to it, a number I didn't understand, and the system wouldn't explain when I asked. Bond thread established. Integrity 1%. 1% of what? Filling toward what? The hearth bond had been so chatty about regard and boons and free power. About the thread it went quiet. The specific, careful quiet of a thing that doesn't tell you the price until you're in too deep to hand the goods back. I looked up the length of that invisible thread at my wife, beautiful, lethal, already done looking at me, already a mountain regarding the weather again, and I thought, all right. I have to make that woman care if I live. For real, or I'm the joke forever. And then, down the table, Aunt Sulan leaned toward a young man in gold I hadn't clocked yet, handsome, smug, eyes fixed on wonking like she was a prize with his name half-written on the tag. And over the noise of the hall, I caught her murmur the words that turned my survivable little evening into a war. Patience, the death vow has one other way to break, nephew. If the husband dies, she's free to wed you. A sip of wine, a paper-cut smile, and husbands like that, they die all the time. The thing about surviving a banquet that was supposed to end you is that nobody throws you a parade for it. They just adjust the story. By breakfast the next morning, the Sioux clan had decided that the live-in husband hadn't been clever at all. He'd been lucky. A blind dog finds a bone. A broken clock is right twice a day. The forged annulment had been a clumsy mistake on Aunt Sulan's part. The gossip went, and the doormat had simply been standing in the right spot when it fell over. That was the version everyone agreed on, because the other version, that the family joke had read clan law better than the clan's own elders, was a thing nobody in that compound was willing to say out loud before noon. Fine by me. Let them keep the joke. I'd already learned the joke was the only armor I owned. I'd been awake since dawn, and I'd spent the quiet hours doing the thing I do best, which is reading the terms of a bad deal. My deal was this: one borrowed body parked at the absolute bottom of a world that worshipped strength, one ice-cold wife several realms and one entire social universe above me, one scheming aunt who just learned she couldn't divorce me legally and would therefore, obviously, move to the next option, and one system whose idea of a starting bonus was make the most powerful woman in the city care if you live. I'd turned 4% of her regard into a single thin coin of Kai, and a face that was, very slightly, becoming a problem for her. That was my entire war chest, 4% and a good jaw. So naturally, over a bowl of cold millet I'd been served last and grudgingly, I tried to cheat. Okay, I murmured to the gold panel only I could see, the little frost blue meter sitting smug at 4%. Let's talk efficiency. You pay out when she feels something real about me. Real takes time. I don't have time. So here's my proposal. I go find my wife. I tell her she's the most magnificent creature I've ever laid eyes on, which, for the record, is true, and you pay me for the sentiment. Deal. Devotion accrues only from the wife's genuine regard. The host's statements are not measured. Flattery pays nothing. It's not flattery if it's accurate. The system reads her, not you. Speak to be heard. The meter answers to her heart, not your tongue. I'd suspected as much, but a man has to test the fence to know where the current runs. So I ran the rest of the experiment, because I am thorough and I had nothing better to do while pretending to be furniture. Over the course of that morning I tried, with the discipline of a scientist, to game the meter every cheap way I knew. I bowed extra low to a passing elder and thought warm thoughts at the cosmos, nothing. I helped a servant carry a water jar and made sure to look noble doing it, nothing, because there was no Sue wonking within 100 paces to feel anything about it. I even, in a moment I'm not proud of, stood outside the training courtyard and tried to will her into being impressed by the sheer quality of my standing there. The meter did not so much as twitch, and that, weirdly, was the moment I stopped being afraid of the system and started respecting it. Because a cheat you can game is a cheat that's lying to you. This one couldn't be flattered, couldn't be coerced, couldn't be tricked. It paid out for exactly one thing in the whole world. A genuinely cold woman genuinely, against her own will, starting to give a damn, and that meant every coin I ever earned off it would be real. No counterfeit. The most honest currency in existence, and the hardest to mint. It also meant I needed to actually understand the woman, not the legend. So I spent the morning learning the household instead, because you learn a person by learning who orbits them. There was Sue Heng first, because Sue Heng made sure of it. My wife's cousin, 20, Kai-si and proud of it, built like a young bull and twice as fond of the sound of his own snorting. He'd made a hobby of me for years. The original Jiangmu had been his favorite thing to shove into doorframes, and he found me in the East Corridor that morning specifically to confirm the natural order hadn't changed. "Heard you got lucky last night, dog," he said, planting himself in my path. "Don't get used to it. Aunt Sulan's not done with you." And me, he cracked his knuckles, which I think he believed was menacing. I never needed an annulment to put a stray in its place. Here's the thing my borrowed muscles couldn't do yet, and my borrowed brain absolutely could. I looked at Sue Heng and the room flickered, and the little meter beside him, because it turns out the upgrade reads anyone close, not just my wife, showed me a young man who was 90% noise and 10% terror, that the family was changing shape around him in ways he didn't understand. So I didn't flinch and I didn't fight. I just smiled the calm, knowing smile that had unsettled 100 opposing counsels and said, "You're right. You never did. That's going to be a problem for you later, Heng, that you learn to win without ever learning why you were winning. But don't worry about it today. I stepped around him. Today you're still the strongest man in this corridor. Enjoy it." He didn't have an answer for that because there isn't one, and a man with no answer just stands there reddening while the doormat walks off. Small win. They are the only kind I had. I banked it. Then there was the steward, Elder Fang, sour, exact. The kind of man who measures the rice ration to the grain and dies a little when someone takes two. He didn't bully me. Worse, he simply didn't see me, the way you don't see a coat rack, and his contempt was so total it had become a kind of administrative weather. I filed him under obstacle, procedural, beatable. Then in the kitchens, where I'd gone to return my bowl because nobody had ever once cleared up after the live-in husband, there was the old cook. She was 60 if she was a day, round and quick, with flour to the elbows and eyes that missed nothing. And when I set my bowl down, she looked at me for a long, frank moment, at the face. I realized at the 4% change in it. And then, without a word, she ladled a second helping of millet into a clean bowl, this one warm, and pushed it across the counter at me. "You stood up last night," she said. "Not a question. First time in 8 years anyone in this house stood up to that woman." She went back to her pot. "Eat while it's hot. Standing up makes a body hungry." I ate it. It was the first warm meal that borrowed body had been given freely in its entire miserable tenure. And I want to tell you the system rang for it, but it didn't, because the cook's kindness was the cook's, not Wonking's, and the meter only answers to one heart. Still, I marked her Auntie Bo, the others called her, in the small private ledger I was keeping, the one that tracked who in this place might one day be an ally instead of an audience. It was a short list. She was the only name on it. But every fortune starts with one entry, and I've never met a kingdom that didn't, somewhere near the bottom, run on its cooks. I was halfway through the warm bowl, almost relaxed, when the gong sounded in the main hall. The summoning gong, the one that gathered the whole clan. I knew before I got there. You develop an instinct, in my old line of work. for the sound a system makes when it's about to be used against you, and a summoning gong the morning after Su Lan lost in public is not the sound of good news. The hall was already filling when I slipped to my usual spot at the back, among the furniture, and at the head of it stood my aunt by marriage in fresh plum-colored robes, perfectly composed, not a trace of last night's defeat on her, which, if you know how to read people, is the most dangerous look a loser can wear. A loser who's still upset is improvising. A loser who's calm has a plan. Su Wonking sat at the high seat, cold and remote, and her gray eyes found me at the back for exactly one heartbeat before she made herself look away, and I clocked it. And so, I'd bet, did Su Lan, which may have been half the point of what came next. Clan of Su, Su Lan began, warm as a frostbitten orchard. Last night certain irregularities were raised regarding a document. I accept the correction graciously. A small bow, gracious as a closing trap. It has reminded me, however, of a duty long neglected. We have among us a member whose contribution to this clan has never once been formally assessed. 8 years and not a single ledger hall trial to his name. Her eyes came to me, and the paper-cut smile arrived precisely on schedule. It is past time we measured exactly what our Wonking's husband is worth. By the old law, every member proves their place at the Jade. I am merely asking that Jiang Mu prove his. The hall murmured, delighted, because they all knew what the Jade would say about a body temper nobody, and they were already enjoying it. And I stood at the back with a warm bowl going cold in my hands, and did the math I do, and I'll be honest with you, for one cold second, I didn't see the loophole. I saw a procedure built specifically to be unbeatable by a man with no power, dressed up as fairness, sprung in open hall where I couldn't lawyer it in a corner. Su Lan had learned from last night. She wasn't forging anything this time. She was going to beat me with the truth. The truth that I was, on paper, worth nothing at all. The first trial, Su Lan said sweetly, will be at dawn tomorrow. I do hope the husband is ready. Su Wonking's gaze cut to me one more time, and this time she didn't look away fast enough, and what was in it wasn't ice. It was a warning. She has something, be ready. I gave the room my doormat smile and my bowed head, the picture of a man already beaten, and inside, where the lawyer lives, I started very quietly to read the new contract for the loose thread I knew, I had to believe was in there somewhere. Because there's always a loose thread, even when they beat you with the truth, especially then. I accept the correction graciously. A small bow, gracious as a closing trap. It has reminded me, however, of a duty long neglected. We have among us a member whose contribution to this clan has never once been formally assessed. 8 years and not a single ledger hall trial to his name. Her eyes came to me, and the paper-cut smile arrived precisely on schedule. It is past time we measured exactly what our Wonking's husband is worth. By the old law, every member proves their place at the Jade. I am merely asking that Jiang Mu prove his. The hall murmured, delighted, because they all knew what the Jade would say about a body temper nobody, and they were already enjoying it. And I stood at the back with a warm bowl going cold in my hands, and did the math I do, and I'll be honest with you, for one cold second, I didn't see the loophole. I saw a procedure built specifically to be unbeatable by a man with no power, dressed up as fairness, sprung in open hall where I couldn't lawyer it in a corner. Su Lan had learned from last night. She wasn't forging anything this time. She was going to beat me with the truth. The truth that I was, on paper, worth nothing at all. The first trial, Su Lan said sweetly, will be at dawn tomorrow. I do hope the husband is ready. Su Wonking's gaze cut to me one more time, and this time she didn't look away fast enough, and what was in it wasn't ice. It was a warning. She has something, be ready. I gave the room my doormat smile and my bowed head, the picture of a man already beaten, and inside, where the lawyer lives, I started very quietly to read the new contract for the loose thread I knew, I had to believe was in there somewhere. Because there's always a loose thread, even when they beat you with the truth, especially then. I found the loose thread at midnight, by candlelight, in the clan's own law. Here's what took me half the night to appreciate about the Ledger Hall. In the Sioux clan, your worth was read at a slab of spirit jade. You pressed your wrist to it, and it sang your cultivation out loud for the whole clan to hear. Goldcore rang it like a struck gong. Body temper made it cough out a noise like a dying frog. And by the old law Sioux Lan was so suddenly fond of, a member who fell below the floor for 3 trials running could be struck from the rolls, disowned, divorced, put out the gate with nothing. That was her play, not a forgery this time. Truth applied 3 times, until the clan itself did the divorce for her, clean and legal, and entirely her hands stayed off the knife. It was good. I want to give her that. It was genuinely good. But every procedure that runs on a schedule has one weakness, and it's the schedule. 3 trials running. Sioux Lan needed all 3 to land before the clan's mood could shift. Because a clan's mood is the only thing an elder truly fears, lose the room and even a winning case curdles. Which meant the moment she called the first trial, she was committed to calling the second and third fast. Before last night's, the doormat made a fool of her gossip could ferment into why is she so desperate to be rid of him. She had to rush. And a rushed proceeding is a sloppy proceeding. And a sloppy proceeding has gaps in the paperwork you can drive a cart through. So I wasn't going to pass the first trial. I was going to fail it spectacularly. The worst, most theatrical, most pathetic body temper showing the ledger hall had ever recorded, and force her to spring trials 2 and 3 before she was ready, onto ground I'd already mapped. That was the plan that needed her, because the lawyer's half I could do alone at a candle. The other half getting strong enough, fast enough, to survive the part of this that wasn't paperwork, that ran entirely through one cold woman's heart, and the meter still sat at 4%, and you cannot lawyer your way into a feeling. So at dawn I went to find my wife, again, which by the standards of this body's life expectancy was roughly the courage of petting a tiger to check if it's friendly. She trained alone in the eastern courtyard before the household woke, her pale longsword cutting lines through the cold air, so clean they looked drawn with a ruler, frost curling off the edge with every form. I'd seen beautiful things in 2 lifetimes. I had never seen anything that made me want to applaud and apologize for existing at the same time. She didn't stop when I came in. After 8 years of this body being ignored, that was the expected setting. You're up early, husband. She didn't turn. So not the expected setting. She'd clocked me the second I crossed the gate. They're trialing me at the ledger hall, I said. Your aunt's running it personally, which tells you how invested she is in my professional growth. The sword stopped. She turned, and those pale gray eyes landed on me, actually on me, with that small reassessing line between her brows. And the line held a half-second longer than it had at the banquet, because the bloom had finished settling overnight. The gray was gone from under my eyes. I'd slept 4 hours and woken up looking like a man who'd slept 8 and meant it. She was looking at the husband she'd ignored for 8 years, and getting the quiet, disorienting sense that someone had swapped him in the dark. You came to ask me to save you, she said. Flat attest, no. I came to tell you I'm going to lose on purpose, and I wanted you to hear it from me first, so you don't waste a perfectly good rescue. That got her. Both eyebrows, explain. So I laid it out. Sioux Lan's plan only worked if I scrabbled for legitimacy and then cracked, because a man who fights and fails looks like he hit his ceiling. But if I fail the first trial loud and stupid, I said, the worst showing the hall's ever seen, she has to rush the second and third before the gossip turns on her. A rushed trial is a sloppy trial, and a sloppy trial has a floor I can stand in. I shrugged. I'm not going to out-cultivate your clan, wife. I'm going to out-procedure it. I just needed you to know the losing is on purpose, because I think you might be the only person here who'd be insulted to watch me lose by accident. She was quiet a long moment. Read the room, the new sense. A soft 2-tone meter hovering near her now, frost and warmth, showed me what her face wouldn't. A careful, grudging interest she was working hard to bury. And then Sue Wongking, frost flower of cloudfall, the woman who looked at the world the way a mountain looks at weather, snorted. It was small. It escaped before she could stop it. One short exhale of genuine, surprised amusement, and she shut her mouth on it half a second too late and looked almost offended at herself for it. But it had happened. I'd made her laugh. The system rang like a struck bell. Milestone, first honest laughter from Su Wonking. Regard, 4% to 11%. +1 boon +20 devotion. Read the room confirmed. The bloom tier 2. 3 things hit at once, and I had to hold the doormat face through all of them. First, a warm rush poured up my spine. The held coin plus this one, and somewhere under my skin body temper quietly cracked over into Kaisi's first stage. To anyone reading the Jade, I was still a dying frog. Inside, I just skipped a rung people die climbing. Second, the regard meter steadied at 11, and the warmth in it was no longer something I was imagining. And third, tier 2 of the bloom moved through me, and I watched it land on her. Whatever changed in my face when she laughed. Her eyes dropped to my mouth for exactly 1 heartbeat before she hauled them back up, and a faint, furious color touched the snow-pale skin over her cheekbones. She turned away fast and picked her sword back up like it had insulted her. "What will you do with the boon?" she said to the courtyard wall. "Not will you waste it. What will you do?" She'd already assumed I had a use. That was its own small thaw, and I didn't point it out, because the fastest way to lose ground with this woman would be to be caught counting it. "Cash it into something that won't get me killed," I said. The system had offered me a slim menu when the boon landed, and most of it I'd waved off. A Kai surge would show on the Jade. A flashy technique would show everywhere, and a live-in husband who suddenly radiates power gets a cage or a quiet knife. I'd taken the one nobody would ever see, a minor mind dart called Clarion Read. It did exactly one thing. Once a day, it let me hear whether a spoken statement was true. A lie detector. For a man about to walk into a rushed, sloppy clan tribunal full of people who would, every one of them, be lying. I didn't tell her that part. I'd tell her everything eventually. I'd already decided that much, somewhere between the banquet and the millet, but some truths you have to earn the standing to land, and I wanted to be a man worth that one before I spent it. So I just said, "Trust me," which is a thing you should never say to a sword saint, and she gave me a look that said she'd noted the audacity and was choosing, for now, to let me keep my teeth. "Don't be late to your own humiliation," she said. "Wouldn't dream of it." I left before the grin reached my face, because I'd just learned the most dangerous fact in the kingdom and I didn't want her to see me holding it. The colder she played it, the more it cost her, and the more it cost her, the more I won. The meter ran on her heart, and her heart, it turned out, was not nearly as frozen as the legend swore. The ledger hole filled fast that morning. Word travels when there's a hanging, and a doormat at the Jade was the best entertainment the Su clan had been offered in years. Cold stone, 100 relatives, Su Heng grinning in the front row like he'd bought a ticket, Elder Fang with his ledger and his contempt, and at the slab itself a presiding elder I'd never met, and beside her, of course, my aunt, plum-robed and patient, here to watch the truth do her killing for her. Su Wonking took the high seat. She didn't look at me, but the warmth meter, glowing in the corner of my sight where only I could see it, told me she was paying closer attention to this room than to any room she'd sat in for years. Jiang Mu, the presiding elder, intoned, "Approach the Jade. Let the clan hear your worth." I stepped forward, doormat smile welded on, 4% of a feeling turned to 11 and a lie detector primed behind my eyes, and laid my wrist against the cold stone, and got ready to give the Su clan the single worst performance of my life, on purpose, and the best one of my career in disguise. The Jade began slowly to cough. I'd tell her everything eventually. I'd already decided that much, somewhere between the banquet and the millet, but some truths you have to earn the standing to land, and I wanted to be a man worth that one before I spent it. So I just said, "Trust me," which is a thing you should never say to a sword saint, and she gave me a look that said she'd noted the audacity and was choosing, for now, to let me keep my teeth. "Don't be late to your own humiliation," she said. "Wouldn't dream of it." I left before the grin reached my face, because I'd just learned the most dangerous fact in the kingdom and I didn't want her to see me holding it. The colder she played it, the more it cost her, and the more it cost her, the more I won. The meter ran on her heart, and her heart, it turned out, was not nearly as frozen as the legend swore. The ledger hole filled fast that morning. Word travels when there's a hanging, and a doormat at the Jade was the best entertainment the Sioux clan had been offered in years. Cold stone, 100 relatives, Su Heng grinning in the front row like he'd bought a ticket, Elder Fang with his ledger and his contempt. And at the slab itself, a presiding elder I'd never met. And beside her, of course, my aunt, plum-robed and patient, here to watch the truth do her killing for her. Su Wonking took the high seat. She didn't look at me. The warmth meter, glowing in the corner of my sight where only I could see it, told me she was paying closer attention to this room than to any room she'd sat in for years. Jiang Mu, the presiding elder, intoned, "Approach the Jade. Let the clan hear your worth." I stepped forward, doormat's smile welded on, 4% of a feeling turned to 11 and a lie detector primed behind my eyes, and laid my wrist against the cold stone, and got ready to give the Sioux clan the single worst performance of my life, on purpose, and the best one of my career in disguise. The Jade began slowly to cough. There's an art to losing on purpose, and it is harder than winning, because winning only requires you to be good, and losing on purpose requires you to be good while looking like garbage in front of 100 people who already think you're garbage. You have to fail convincingly enough that the enemy commits, but not so pathetically that the woman whose regard is your entire power source decides she married a sack of wet straw after all. It's a narrow beam. I walked it. I laid my wrist on the spirit jade and let it cough out the dying frog note, the genuine body temper sound my paper realm should have made, because I'd buried the kaisi I'd secretly cracked into so deep that the Jade couldn't smell it. And then I performed. I strained, I screwed up my face. I let my arm tremble like I was pouring everything I had into a vessel that simply had no bottom, and I made a low, desperate sound that I am not proud of, the sound of a man at the absolute end of his pathetic ceiling, reaching for a power that was never coming. The hall ate it up. Su Heng laughed so hard he had to hold the man next to him. Elder Fang made a small note in his ledger, with the grim satisfaction of an accountant watching a debt come due. And Su Lan didn't laugh, because she wasn't here for entertainment, she was here for a result, and she watched my failure with the flat, patient eyes of a woman checking an item off a list. Body temper, the presiding elder announced. Below the floor, the first trial is recorded as a failure. A roar of delight. I bowed my head and let them have it, and through the noise I snuck one glance at the high seat. Su Wonking's face was perfect ice, but the warmth meter glowing in the corner of my sight hadn't dropped a point. If anything, it had ticked up, because she knew what I was doing, and watching a man take a public humiliation on purpose, with a steady hand for a plan, is its own kind of impressive. She wasn't ashamed of me. She was waiting. Good, so was I. Given the result, Su Lan said, rising smoothly into the noise, exactly on the schedule I'd bet my life she'd be forced onto. And to spare the clan a drawn-out spectacle, I propose we not delay. The second trial tomorrow at dawn. The third the dawn after. She spread her hands gracious. Let us resolve the question of the husband's worth quickly, and let our wonking move forward unburdened. There it was, the rush. She just compressed 3 trials into 3 days because the room was hers today, and she didn't trust it to stay hers. I'd read her correctly. The relief of that was a warm thing in my chest, right up until the presiding elder spoke again, and I understood that Su Lan had read me a little too. A sensible proposal, the elder said, and as presiding elder, I will of course oversee all 3 trials personally, to ensure the standard is held. I felt that one land wrong, and I didn't know why yet, so I filed it and watched. Because here's a rule I've never once seen broken. When the person running the contest volunteers, unprompted, to keep running it, it's because they already know how it ends. I went looking that night. A man who reads everything finds everything, and what I found, by candle, in the clan's own records, which Auntie Bo, bless her, helped me reach by the simple act of telling a sleepy record servant to go warm himself by her stove for an hour, was 2 things that turned Su Lan's clean little procedure from a problem into a case. The first thing was the presiding elder. His name was Elder Ru, and on paper he was neutral, a senior of standing brought in to keep the trials fair. In Auntie Bo's records, the household ledgers, the ones that track who eats whose rice, Elder Ru had, over the past 2 years, quietly received a great deal of Su lands. Gifts, spirit stones, a debt of a son's gambling settled. He wasn't neutral. He was bought, and he was the man who would, at his sole discretion, decide whether my performance at Trials 2 and 3 met the standard. Su Lan didn't need me to fail honestly. She had a judge who'd rule I failed no matter what I did. That's why she'd let me have today. Today was theater. The verdict was already written, and the second thing was worse and better because it was the loose thread. Among the trial records, Elder Ru had filed in advance, the sloppy, beautiful tale of a man who rushed was a supplementary ledger of my infractions. 8 years of them. Disrespect to elders, dereliction of chores, a whole documented history of the live-in husband's worthlessness, dated and stamped, ready to be read into the record at Trial 3 to justify striking me from the rolls for cause as well as for weakness, so the ruling would be unappealable. The only problem with it, the gap I could drive a cart through, was that several of the dated infractions had happened on days the household records put the original Jiang Mu somewhere else entirely. An infraction in the East Wing on a day the man was confirmed, in Elder Fang's own rice ledger, hauling water at the West Gate. A disrespect to an elder logged on a date that Elder had been away from Cloudfall, a fact recorded in the clan's own travel rolls. Elder Ru hadn't documented 8 years of my failures. He'd manufactured them recently in a hurry, and he'd been too lazy to cross-check his own forgeries against the clan's other records. He'd forged a clan document. Just like Su Lan had at the banquet, these people kept reaching for the same weapon, and it kept being the one I knew best. I sat back from the candle and let it settle, the cold, clean feeling of a case coming together. I had a bought judge and a forged ledger. On their own, each was just my word against an elder's, and my word was worth a dying frog's. But I also had something neither of them knew I had, a borrowed lie detector behind my eyes, one use a day, that could turn an elder's spoken denial into proof in front of the whole clan. The trick would be making Elder Ru say the lie out loud, on the record, in a form the hall couldn't unhear. You don't win a rigged trial by being stronger than the rig. You win by making the rig the thing on trial. I blew out the candle. Across the dark compound in the high house, a single window still burned, wonking study, and I wondered if she was awake reading the same lore I was from the other end, and the thought that she might be did something to me that the system didn't have a meter for. Dawn came gray and cold. The hall filled. Elder Ru took the presiding seat with the serene confidence of a man holding a verdict in his sleeve. Su Lan beside him patient as a winter pond. Su Heng grinning, wonking a blade of ice on the high seat with her warmth meter, where only I could see it, glowing steady and high. Jiang Mu, Elder Ru intoned. Approach for the second trial. I stepped forward, doormat smile in place, and I did not go to the jade. I stopped in the center of the hall instead, where the light was best and the whole room could see my face, the way you stop when you mean to address a court rather than submit to one, and a small confused murmur went through the relatives, because furniture doesn't position itself. Before I press the jade, I said, calm, almost bored, the voice you use when you already know you've won. I have one procedural question for the presiding elder. Just one, and then I'll happily cough like a frog for everyone's entertainment. I turned to Elder Ru, and I let the lawyer come all the way up out of this borrowed chest. Elder Ru, for the record before the clan, have you received any gift, payment, or settled debt from Elder Su Lan in the past 2 years? The hall went quiet. Su Lan's patient face stopped being patient. And Elder Ru, caught flat, certain his records were buried, certain a dying frog couldn't possibly have a fang. Did the thing bought men always do when they think they are safe? He opened his mouth to lie. Dawn came gray and cold. The hall filled. Elder Ru took the presiding seat with the serene confidence of a man holding a verdict in his sleeve. Su Lan beside him patient as a winter pond. Su Heng grinning, wonking a blade of ice on the high seat with her warmth meter, where only I could see it, glowing steady and high. Jiangmu, Elder Ru intoned. Approach for the second trial. I stepped forward, doormat smile in place, and I did not go to the jade. I stopped in the center of the hall instead, where the light was best and the whole room could see my face. The way you stop when you mean to address a court rather than submit to one. And a small confused murmur went through the relatives, because furniture doesn't position itself. Before I press the jade, I said, calm, almost bored, the voice you use when you already know you've won. I have one procedural question for the presiding elder. Just one, and then I'll happily cough like a frog for everyone's entertainment. I turned to Elder Ru, and I let the lawyer come all the way up out of this borrowed chest. Elder Ru, for the record before the clan, have you received any gift, payment, or settled debt from Elder Su Lan in the past 2 years? The hall went quiet. Su Lan's patient face stopped being patient. And Elder Ru, caught flat, certain his records were buried. Certain a dying frog couldn't possibly have a fang. Did the thing bought men always do when they think they are safe? He opened his mouth to lie. No, Elder Ru said. I have received nothing from Elder Su Lan. My judgment in these trials is wholly impartial. Behind my eyes, Clarion Reed, my one use for the day, spent on exactly this sentence, rang cold and certain, the way a struck wineglass rings, and showed me the word in a color I can only describe as rot. A lie, a flat, documented, provable lie, spoken aloud on the record in open hall. Now, here's the part the candle-lit half of me had worked out the night before, the part that mattered. I couldn't say the system in my head says you're lying, because nobody could hear my system, and a sword saint's husband claiming a magic lie detector would get me the cage, not the win. Clarion Reed didn't win the trial. It just told me privately for certain which thread to pull, so I wouldn't waste my one shot yanking on a true statement and looking like a fool. It pointed at the loose thread. I still had to pull it where the whole room could see the seam. Impartial, I repeated pleasantly. Good. I'm glad we have that on the record, Elder, because I'd hate to think a man deciding my fate had a reason to want a particular outcome. I turned, unhurried, to Elder Fang, the sour steward, the man who measured rice to the grain, the man who had never once in 8 years bent a number for anyone, including me. Elder Fang, you keep the household ledgers. Every gift in and out of this clan passes your brush. A simple question, and I'll trust your books over any man's memory because I've watched you, and you'd sooner die than misrecord a grain. I let that sit, a small true compliment, the only kind that works on a man like Fang. In the past 2 years, has Elder Su Lan made any gift, payment, or debt settlement to Elder Ru? Yes or no? It's in your books either way. And Elder Fang, who did not like me, who had never liked me, but who liked being doubted even less, and who had just been publicly named the one honest ledger in a room of liars, did the thing his entire sour soul was built to do. He consulted the truth. The book's record 3, Fang said stiffly, because a man like Fang cannot make himself misstate a number even to save an ally. A gift of spirit stones last winter, a second at the new year, and the settlement of a debt owed by Elder Ru's son, paid by Elder Su Lan, 4 months past. He closed the ledger with a snap that echoed. The books do not lie. I keep them. The hall made a sound like a held breath letting go. Elder Ru had said nothing. The book said 3, and every relative in that room had just watched the impartial judge get caught in a lie by the one man nobody could accuse of bias. And you could see it move through the crowd like cold through water, the slow, delicious turning of a mood, the exact thing Su Lan had rushed 3 days to outrun. I didn't stop. You never stop when the seam splits, you open it. So the man judging my worth is paid by the woman who wants me gone. I said, to the room now, not to Ru. That alone voids these trials. A presiding elder with an interest cannot preside. That's the oldest rule in the clan code, older than the 3-trial law she's so fond of. But I want you to see how deep it goes, because I think you've been lied to about more than one thing. I drew out the second document, the supplementary ledger of my infractions, Ru's own filing, the one he'd buried in advance. Elder Rue filed this. 8 years of my failures, dated and stamped, ready to strike me for cause. It's very thorough. I smiled. It's also forged, and he was in too much of a hurry to forge it well. I read them out. The infraction in the East Wing on the day Fang's own rice ledger placed Jiang Mu at the West Gate. The disrespect to an elder logged on a date, the clan's travel rolls, had that elder 3 valets away. One by one, each forged entry against the clan's own honest records, each impossibility laid flat for the hall to see. And I made sure, every time, to credit Fang's books and the clan's rolls as the truth that exposed the lie, because the point was never I'm clever. The point was your own records say so. You can argue with a doormat. You cannot argue with the rice ledger. By the 4th forged entry, Elder Rue had gone the gray of old ash and stopped trying to interrupt. By the 6th, Su Lan had stood, and that was her mistake, the same one she'd made at the banquet, the reflex of a powerful person who's used to fixing a room by rising in it. This is absurd, she said, sharp now, the warmth gone from the Winter Pond voice. The husband twists clerical errors into, "Are they errors, Aunt?" I asked. And then I turned, deliberately, away from her, to the one seat I'd been saving, because a case isn't won until the only person who can rule hears it, and looked at the high seat. Clan head, your aunt called these trials to measure my worth. We've measured something. Not mine, I let the pause stretch. A bought judge. A forged ledger of crimes I couldn't have committed. A procedure rushed so the room couldn't think. I'd ask you to rule on whether these trials meet the standard of the Su clan. Not the husband. The trials. The hall turned slowly to Su Wonking. She had not said a word the entire time. She sat with her cold, gray eyes moving over the spread of documents, over her aunt standing pale and caught, over Elder Rue the color of ash, and over me, one heartbeat longer than she needed to, that small line between her brows that I was learning to read like a second meter. And then she stood, and 100 cultivators flinched at the scrape of her chair, and the frost in her voice could have stopped a river. Elder Rue is removed from the roles of presiding elders. His judgments these 3 days struck, she said. The trials are void, called by an interested party, judged by a bought one, built on a forged ledger. Elder Su Lan. The temperature in the hall dropped 10 degrees as she turned to her aunt. You will answer to the Elder Council for the forgery of a clan document. Again, the again went through Su Lan like a blade. This clan does not measure its people with rigged scales. We are finished here. It wasn't kindness toward me. She'd ruled on the trials, exactly as I'd asked, not on the husband. She was too careful, too proud to be seen choosing me twice in a week. But the system knew the difference between a public verdict and a private feeling, and it had been reading her the whole time. And as the hall broke into uproar around me, it rang behind my eyes, soft and sure. Milestone, Su Wonking acts on her own judgment to protect you, not for the clan, but because she believed you. Regard, 11% to 19%. Plus 1 boon plus 24 devotion. The bloom, tier 3. 19%. The third tier of the bloom moved through me quiet as a key turning, and I felt this borrowed body settle another degree into the man it was becoming. The slump gone, the voice lower, a presence the room kept glancing toward without knowing why. Su Heng wasn't grinning anymore. Even Elder Fang gave me a single grudging look that, from him, was practically a bouquet. And Su Wonking, sweeping past me toward the doors in a sea of appended gossip, slowed just slightly, just for me, and said low, so only I caught it. You let them laugh at you for a full day to win in an hour. It's cheaper than fighting, I said, and the look on their faces now is worth the wait. The line between her brows almost became something else. Husband, she said, and it wasn't flat, and then she was gone, and I stood in the wreck of my own rigged execution feeling, against all sense and survival instinct, dangerously good. The good lasted until midday. That's when the gate watch horn sounded, the long note, the one for an arriving carriage of rank, and Auntie Bo found me in the corridor with flour on her hands and worry on her face, and said the thing that turned my clean little victory into the first day of a much larger war. There's a sect carriage on the Cloudfall Road, she said. Gold lacquer, goldfall colors. Come for the clan head's hand, the herald's crying for a young master who's been promised her. Her eyes searched my new face. They say he doesn't lose that one, and they say he's already been told there's only a doormat standing in his way. 19%. The third tier of the bloom moved through me quiet as a key turning, and I felt this borrowed body settle another degree into the man it was becoming. The slump gone, the voice lower, a presence the room kept glancing toward without knowing why. Su Heng wasn't grinning anymore. Even Elder Fang gave me a single grudging look that, from him, was practically a bouquet. And Su Wonking, sweeping past me toward the doors in a sea of appended gossip, slowed just slightly just for me, and said low so only I caught it. You let them laugh at you for a full day to win in an hour. It's cheaper than fighting, I said, and the look on their faces now is worth the wait. The line between her brows almost became something else. A husband, she said, and it wasn't flat, and then she was gone, and I stood in the wreck of my own rigged execution feeling, against all sense and survival instinct, dangerously good. The good lasted until midday. That's when the gate watch horn sounded, the long note, the one for an arriving carriage of rank, and Auntie Bo found me in the corridor with flour on her hands and worry on her face, and said the thing that turned my clean little victory into the first day of a much larger war. There's a sect carriage on the Cloudfall Road, she said. Gold lacquer, goldfall colors. Come for the clan head's hand, the herald's crying for a young master who's been promised her. Her eyes searched my new face. They say he doesn't lose that one, and they say he's already been told there's only a doormat standing in his way. The herald arrived an hour ahead of his master, which is its own kind of insult. You send a herald ahead when you want a place to be afraid of you before you've bothered to show up. He was a thin, immaculate man in goldfall gold, and he stood in the center of the Sioux clan's main hall and read from a scroll as though he were doing us a favor by being disgusted in our home. The young master Yan Zhuo, heir of the Goldfall sect, Pillar Realm, victor of the Three Rivers tournament, extends to the Sioux clan the honor of an alliance. He will take the clan head Su Wonking to wife. In exchange, the Goldfall sect will extend its protection to this establishment. His lip did something complicated when he looked around at us. The clan need only set aside the irregularity of its current arrangement. The young master is generous. He will see the live-in husband compensated and dismissed before he arrives, so that no awkwardness mars the introduction. Compensated and dismissed. I was standing at the back, among the furniture, and the herald's eyes slid right over me the way they were trained to, never once landing, because why would you look at a thing you'd been told was already gone? Here's what surprised me. The room didn't laugh. A week ago, half the Sioux elders would have leapt at this. A sect's protection, a real marriage, the embarrassing husband swept out with the morning trash. Goldfall was a power. The offer was, by the cold arithmetic these people lived on, a good deal. And I watched the elder council shift in their seats, and I watched the calculation move across their faces, and I understood that the most dangerous thing in this hall wasn't Yan Zhuo at all. It was that the offer was tempting, and they were tempted, and a clan that's tempted will talk itself into anything. Su Wonking sat on the high seat and let the herald finish, and her face gave them nothing. But the warmth meter in the corner of my sight, the one only I could see, was doing something I'd never watched it do under pressure. It wasn't cold. It was taut, held. The look of a woman bracing for the council she'd carried for 8 years to finally, quietly, sell her for a good price, and refusing to let any of them see it land. So I did a thing I want to be honest about. It wasn't strategy. The lawyer in me had 3 clean procedural objections ready. But I didn't lead with any of them, because read the room had just shown me that the threat in this room wasn't legal. It was emotional. A clan talking itself into a betrayal, and you don't answer a feeling with a clause. You answer it with a louder feeling. That's a generous offer, I said, and stepped out of the back of the crowd to the front of it. The hall went still in the particular way it does when furniture moves on its own. Truly, I went on, easy, carrying the courtroom voice. Sect protection, a powerful match. I can see every elder here doing the sums, and I don't blame you, they're good sums. I let that land because the fastest way to lose a room is to pretend their temptation is shameful. You have to grant it before you can turn it. So let me add the column the herald left off. Goldfall isn't offering an alliance. They're offering a purchase. They want the clan head, your clan head, the woman who held this house together when the seat sat empty, who buried your last lord and didn't let the vultures take the lands, handed over as a term. Not a wife, a clause, and the day you prove the Sioux clan will trade its own head for protection, you tell every sect in Yunju exactly what we are. Not a clan. A thing that can be bought if the buyer's big enough. I looked slowly around at them. Goldfall doesn't want a partner. They want to find out how cheap we are, and the elders who'd take this deal are about to quote them a price. It was quiet a moment. Then old Elder Y, the eldest of the council, the one whose opinion the others actually weighed, made a low sound in his throat that might have been agreement, and the tempted look went out of the room like a tide going back. Not because I'd outlawyered them. Because I'd made the deal shameful to want, turned a good price into a cheap one. And pride, in a clan like this, beats arithmetic every time you can get it standing up. The Sioux clan, Sue Wonking said into the shift, rising, and her voice was the first crack of a frozen lake, is not for sale, and neither am I. Tell your young master he may visit. He may not collect. She let the frost settle over the herald like snow, and he may keep his generosity. We've seen what Goldfall's generosity costs. The herald left stiff and furious, and the council, to a man, bowed deeper to their clan head than they had in years, because nothing makes a wavering room loyal like being reminded out loud what it almost sold. She found me afterward in the eastern courtyard at dusk, where she trained, where I'd taken to turning up like a man who hadn't learned his lesson about tigers. You didn't use the law, she said. No greeting. She did everything like that, straight to the seam. You had a legal objection. I saw you set it down. The law would have won the argument and lost the room, I said. They didn't need to be told the deal was invalid. They needed to be ashamed they wanted it. Different tools, I shrugged. A contract's just the floor, wife. People don't betray you because it's legal. They betray you because it's tempting and someone gave them permission. So I took the permission away. She looked at me for a long moment, and the courtyard was going blue with evening, and the warmth meter and the woman both did something at once that I felt in my chest before I read it on the panel. She wasn't bracing anymore. The held look was gone. The first time since I'd woken in this world, Sue Wonking looked at me like someone who was not, for this one moment, standing on a wall alone. 8 years, she said quietly, the council has measured me, what I'm worth, who I should be traded to. My father held them off, and then he died, and I held them off, and I never once heard a single soul in this clan stand up in that hall and say I was not for sale. Her gray eyes were very steady on my new face. Today, the husband everyone wanted to dismiss did it. Before I had to. Somebody had to beat you to it, I said. You've been doing it alone long enough. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The system answered for her. Milestone, Sue Wonking is defended without being asked and lets herself feel it. Regard, 19% to 27%. +1 boon +30 devotion realm. Kai-si to Kai-si, late stage, hidden. The bloom holds. Note, her regard now outpaces her guard. That last line was new, and I turned it over while the warm rush settled into my bones. Her regard now outpaces her guard. The system was telling me the gap had crossed a line, that the wall she kept between what she felt and what she'd let herself show was, for the first time, losing. She'd feel a thing before she could decide whether to. That was the thaw becoming a current. That was, in the cold ledger of my survival, everything. You should go, she said at last. But she didn't move, and neither did I, and for one long moment in the blue dusk, two people who had every reason to keep a careful distance simply didn't. Then the gate horn sounded the long note again, closer, this time in the courtyard itself, and the moment broke, and the warmth meter snapped back behind its frost as Sue Wonking's face went clan head cold in the space of a breath. Because the carriage had arrived, gold lacquer, gold full colors, A dozen guards in matching silks fanning out across our courtyard like they already owned the flagstones. And down from it, in robes worth more than the entire Sioux compound, stepped a handsome young man with a storm in the air around him, and a smile like a man pricing a stable, and he looked around at our home, and at last, with vast and lazy amusement, his eyes found me. "So," said Yanjiuo, "this is the doormat I've heard so much about." That last line was new, and I turned it over while the warm rush settled into my bones. Her regard now outpaces her guard. The system was telling me the gap had crossed a line, that the wall she kept between what she felt and what she'd let herself show was, for the first time, losing. She'd feel a thing before she could decide whether to. That was the thaw becoming a current. That was, in the cold ledger of my survival, everything. "You should go," she said at last. But she didn't move, and neither did I, and for one long moment in the blue dusk, two people who had every reason to keep a careful distance simply didn't. Then the gate horn sounded the long note again, closer, this time in the courtyard itself, and the moment broke, and the warmth meter snapped back behind its frost as Sue Wonking's face went clan-head cold in the space of a breath. Because the carriage had arrived, gold lacquer, gold fall colors, a dozen guards in matching silks fanning out across our courtyard like they already owned the flagstones. And down from it, in robes worth more than the entire Sioux compound, stepped a handsome young man with a storm in the air around him, and a smile like a man pricing a stable, and he looked around at our home, and at last, with vast and lazy amusement, his eyes found me. "So," said Yanjiuo, "this is the doormat I've heard so much about." "This is the doormat I've heard so much about." Yanjiuo said it to the courtyard, not to me, the way you'd remark on the weather, and his guards chuckled on cue, and I want to describe the quality of his arrogance because it mattered to everything that followed. It wasn't cruelty, exactly. Cruelty pays attention. This was something cleaner and more useful to me. The absolute, frictionless certainty of a young man who has never once in his life met a problem his cultivation couldn't solve. He didn't hate me. He didn't fear me. He genuinely could not conceive of me as a thing that could affect his day. And a man who cannot imagine losing is a man who will agree to terms he hasn't read, because why would you read the rules of a game you can't lose? I filed that. It was the only weapon in the courtyard with my name on it. "Young Master Yan," I said, and bowed low, doormat perfect, because a man underestimates you twice as hard when you help him. "We're honored." "You can drop that," he said, finally deigning to look at me. And I watched his certainty hitch, just slightly on my face, the bloom 3 tiers in, the borrowed body's slump gone, a presence that didn't match the story he'd been told. He covered it fast. I expected something more pathetic, frankly. No matter. A coat of paint on a fence post is still a fence post. He turned to the high seat, to Wonking, and his whole manner changed, the lazy contempt warming into the appraising heat of a man looking at a prize he's already decided is his. "Clan head, I'll be brief since you've already wasted my herald's morning. You're the finest sword talent of your generation, married to a stain to settle a dead man's senility. I'm here to correct that. Set the husband aside, take my name, and the Goldfall sect makes the Sioux clan untouchable in Yunju." He smiled. "I'm told you refused the offer through a servant. I thought you deserved to refuse it to my face. Or accept it. I'm not particular which, the result's the same." "The result," Sue Wonking said, ice from the high seat, "is that I am married, young master, lawfully and by my father's binding word, and I do not intend to unmarry to suit your travel schedule." "Married?" Yan laughed, delighted like she told a joke. "To that, a man with no name, no sect, no realm worth the word. Clan head, be serious. In this world there is exactly one law, and it isn't written in any of your dusty Sioux ledgers." He spread his hands to the watching courtyard, performing now, sure of his audience. "Strength is the law. Strength makes the match, strength makes the claim, strength makes the contract. I am Pillar Realm. He is a stain. By the only law that has ever mattered, the woman goes to the stronger man. Does the great Sioux clan teach its children otherwise? And there it was. He'd said it in front of 40 witnesses, performing for a crowd. the way certain men cannot help but announce their own principles when they think it makes them look like gods. Strength makes the contract. He'd just written the terms himself, and he was too busy enjoying the sound of his own voice to notice he'd handed me a pen. I almost felt bad. I didn't, but I almost did. "You're absolutely right," I said. The courtyard's attention swung to me, the doormat, agreeing pleasantly with the man who'd come to take my wife, and I saw Wonking's gaze sharpen on me from the high seat. Not alarm, recognition, the look of someone who'd watched me set down the law in the hall yesterday, and was now watching me pick up a different tool entirely. Strength makes the contract. I couldn't agree more, young master. I walked toward him, unhurried, the courtroom voice coming up calm and bored, the voice you use when you already know how it ends. "So you won't object to a strength contract? A duel of claim, old form, recognized by every sect in Yunju, including Goldfall. I checked your own sect charter this morning. It's in there, Chapter 4. It was. A man who reads everything finds everything. It's very simple, and it's exactly the law you just preached. A contest of strength to settle a claim. You name a champion. I name a champion, they fight. If your champion wins, I sign my own dismissal with my own hand. No clan blood spilled, and you ride off with your bride and your story all proper. If my champion wins, I let the paws stretch the way you do right before the knife. You ride off with only the story. You renounce the claim, you leave Cloudfall, and you never set foot here again. Witnessed, binding under sect law. By strength, the only law there is." The courtyard had gone very quiet. Yan Zhuo's smile curdled at the edges, because even a man who can't imagine losing can smell a trap closing. He just can't always tell where the teeth are. "You're proposing to fight me." "I'm proposing nothing of the kind," I said. "I weigh about as much as a wet rope, and I'd embarrass us both." I said champions, young master. "You name yours. I name mine." I smiled, the doormat's smile sharpened to a point. "Unless the great Yan Zhuo, victor of the 3 rivers, pillar realm at 25, is afraid of a Stains champion. In which case, of course, we can simply note for the record that you preach strength as the only law right up until someone offered you a contest of it. And then you." Enough, his face had gone dark. He couldn't say no. That was the whole shape of it. A man who just told a crowd that strength is the only law cannot then refuse a contest of strength without becoming, in front of everyone, the coward he'd called me. Pride is a leash. I'd grabbed the end of it, and I wasn't letting go. "Fine, a duel of claim, I accept. I'll name my own sword. I need no champion to break whatever broken-down elder you scrape together." His eyes glittered, certainty flooding back, because he just remembered the part that saved him. "Name your champion, Stain. Name the poor fool who'll die for you. And I'll bury him, and I'll take the widow, and your clever contract will hand her to me itself, witnessed and binding by your own hand." He laughed, and the courtyard, uncertain, laughed with him. "Go on. Who in this whole Sari clan is strong enough to stand for the doormat?" And there was the part of the trap that closed on me. Because he was right. The contract was airtight, and it cut both ways. I'd bound him to a contest of strength he couldn't refuse without disgrace. But a contest of strength needs a champion who can actually win. And I had bet the whole thing, my marriage, my standing, possibly my life, on a duel against a pillar prodigy. And I did not have a single soul in Cloudfall who could beat him. Not one. The clan's strongest were no match for Goldfall's heir. I'd built a beautiful machine and forgotten to check whether I had anyone to put inside it. There was exactly one person in the courtyard who could beat Yan Zhuo. She was sitting on the high seat, watching me, with a single sharp line between her brows. And asking her to be my champion, asking the woman Yan had come to claim to fight for the right not to be claimed, asking the frost flower of Cloudfall to stand up in front of the kingdom as the chosen sword of the family doormat, was a thing I had no right to ask, and every reason to believe she'd refuse, because it would cost her nothing to let me hang, and everything to choose me out loud. "I'll have my champion by the duel," I said, keeping the doormat's smile nailed on while my mind raced. 3 days, as the form allows." 3 days, Yan agreed, grinning now, scenting the corner I'd backed myself into. Take them. It won't matter. He swept toward his carriage, pausing only to look at Wonking one last time, hungry and certain. Enjoy your last 3 days married, clan head. I'll make a much better use of your name than the fence post has. He left. The courtyard erupted, and I stood in the middle of my own airtight, beautiful, two-edged contract, having just bet everything on a champion I didn't have, and slowly, against every instinct of survival, turned to look at the one person in the world who could save me, knowing I had no right at all to ask. A contest of strength needs a champion who can actually win, and I had bet the whole thing, my marriage, my standing, possibly my life, on a duel against a pillar prodigy, and I did not have a single soul in Cloudfall who could beat him. Not one. The clan's strongest were no match for Goldfall's heir. I'd built a beautiful machine and forgotten to check whether I had anyone to put inside it. There was exactly one person in the courtyard who could beat Yan Zhuo. She was sitting on the high seat, watching me, with a single sharp line between her brows. And asking her to be my champion, asking the woman Yan had come to claim to fight for the right not to be claimed, asking the frost flower of Cloudfall to stand up in front of the kingdom as the chosen sword of the family doormat, was a thing I had no right to ask, and every reason to believe she'd refuse, because it would cost her nothing to let me hang, and everything to choose me out loud. I'll have my champion by the duel, I said, keeping the doormat's smile nailed on while my mind raced. 3 days, as the form allows. 3 days, Yan agreed, grinning now, scenting the corner I'd backed myself into. Take them. It won't matter. He swept toward his carriage, pausing only to look at Wonking one last time, hungry and certain. Enjoy your last 3 days married, clan head. I'll make a much better use of your name than the fence post has. He left. The courtyard erupted, and I stood in the middle of my own airtight, beautiful, two-edged contract, having just bet everything on a champion I didn't have, and slowly, against every instinct of survival, turned to look at the one person in the world who could save me, knowing I had no right at all to ask. 3 days to produce a champion who could beat a pillar prodigy. I spent the first one discovering, methodically, that I had none. I want to be clear that I tried. I am not a man who builds a trap, catches his own foot in it, and then simply sits in it nobly. I worked the problem. I went to Elder Y, the eldest of the council, the strongest blade the Sioux clan had left, and Elder Y, who had bowed to me in the hall, who had actually started to like me, looked at me with real regret and said, "Son, I'm Goldcore early stage and 60 years old, and my knees are weather vanes. Yan Zhuo is pillar late stage and 25. I'd last a count of 4. I'll stand for you if you ask, and I'll die, and you'll lose anyway, and then you'll have killed an old man for nothing." Which was true, every word, and I had the grace not to ask. I went further. I sent word, quietly, through Auntie Beau's network of cooks and grooms, which is the real intelligence service of any great house. Never doubt it, feeling out whether there were sellswords in Cloudfall, wandering cultivators, a hungry expert who'd fight for coin. There were a few. None within 3 realms of Yan Zhuo. You don't buy a pillar prodigy's defeat at the market doesn't stock it. And the whole time, the clan watched me with a new and worse kind of pity than before. Before, I'd been the joke. Now I was the man who'd won twice and gotten cocky and bet the marriage on a duel he couldn't field. And they'd liked me just enough that watching it was painful for them, which is its own humiliation, being pitied by people who just learned to respect you. There was one champion who could win. Everyone knew it. Su Heng said it to my face in the corridor, no longer grinning, almost gentle, which unnerved me more than his old shoving. Just ask her dog. She's the only one. She'll fight him. She has to, it's her name on the line too. He shrugged, awkward. You bet on her without asking, so ask. He was right, and that was exactly the thing I would not do. Because here is the line I'd drawn, alone, somewhere in the candlelit hours, and it surprised me to find I meant it more than I'd ever meant anything in either life. The system paid me for her genuine regard. The whole engine of my survival ran on her actually, freely, against her own armor, coming to care. And the fastest way to poison that forever would be to use her, to engineer her into fighting my battle, to make her the weapon in a contract I'd built, to turn the one real thing in this world into another clause I'd leveraged. She'd spent 8 years being valued for what she was worth. I would cut my own throat before I became one more man who measured her by what she could win for him. So I wasn't going to ask. I'd field Elder Y, or I'd field no one and forfeit, and I'd sign my own dismissal with my own hand and walk out the Cloudfall gate with nothing. And I'd do it on my feet, having never once made her the instrument of my survival. It was, I'm aware, a spectacularly stupid principle for a man with no power to hold. I held it anyway. Some things you don't get to keep if you spend them. She found me on the second night, in the eastern courtyard, where else? You've been refusing champions, she said. Straight to the seam, as always. The warmth meter glowed, taut in the corner of my sight. Why offered, you said no. Hang all but begged you to ask me. The whole clan is watching you walk toward a forfeit with your chin up like a fool, and I want to know why. Because the smart move is to ask you, I said, and I'm not going to. You built a contract that needs me to win it, and you won't ask me to win it. Her gray eyes were sharp, baffled, almost angry. That's not principle, husband, that's pride, and pride is going to lose you everything in 2 days. It's not pride. I turned to face her in the blue dark, and I let her see it plain, because Read the Room had taught me she could tell the difference between a man performing sincerity and a man simply being it, and I needed her to see this was the second kind. Wonking. Every person who's ever wanted something from you has measured you by what you could do for them. Your worth, your sword, your name. Your father held the wolves off and then died and left you to hold them off alone, and you've spent 8 years being a prize, something to be traded to whoever's strong enough to claim it. Yanjuo's downstairs right now doing the exact same thing, just louder. I shook my head. I built a stupid contract and I caught my own foot in it, and the price of that is mine to pay, not yours. If I ask you to fight my battle, I'm just one more man turning you into the thing that gets him what he wants. I'd rather lose the marriage than do that to the reason I'd want to keep it. So no, I won't ask. I'm sorry, field Y or let me forfeit. Either way, I walk out of here without having spent you. The courtyard was very quiet. The frost meter and the warmth meter, side by side in my sight, did something I had never seen them do at the same time. The frost cracking, the warmth surging up through the gap like water through ice. And the system, which knew the difference between a public verdict and a private feeling, rang soft and deep behind my eyes. Milestone, you refused to use her at cost to yourself for her sake. Regard, 27% to 38%. Plus 2 boons, plus 44 devotion. The bloom, tier 4 imminent, held pending the duel. Note, she has never been chosen over the chooser's own advantage. Not once. That last line sat in the dark like a struck bell. Not once. 8 years, and not one person had ever put her ahead of what she could win for them. And I'd just done it badly, stupidly, at the cost of my own survival, and it had landed harder than any clever thing I'd ever said. Su Wonking looked at me for a long, long moment, and then she did something the legend never did. She stepped close, one step which on her was an earthquake, and the cold wasn't cold up close, and she said very quietly in a voice with no frost left in it at all, "You impossible man. You'd lose me to avoid using me." "Yes," I admitted. "It's not my best plan. I've had better." "No," she said. "It's the best plan anyone has ever made on my behalf." Her gray eyes held mine in the blue dark, and the line between her brows was gone, replaced by something I didn't have a name for and didn't dare reach for. "Field no one, husband. Forfeit nothing. Tomorrow at the duel, when Yanjuo asks you to name your champion and you stand there with nothing, because you're too principled to ask. The ghost of something almost like a smile, I'll answer for myself. Because you didn't spend me, so I get to spend me. That's the difference, and it's the whole difference, and you're going to have to learn to live with the fact that you've just made me want to." And she turned and walked back toward the high house, leaving me standing in the courtyard with 38% of a feeling, and a bloom held on the edge of breaking, and absolutely no idea what I'd just won, except that it was real, and it was hers, freely given, and tomorrow in front of the whole kingdom she was going to prove it with a sword. Su Wonking looked at me for a long, long moment, and then she did something the legend never did. She stepped close, one step which on her was an earthquake, and the cold wasn't cold up close, and she said very quietly in a voice with no frost left in it at all, "You impossible man. You'd lose me to avoid using me." "Yes," I admitted. "It's not my best plan. I've had better." "No," she said. "It's the best plan anyone has ever made on my behalf." Her gray eyes held mine in the blue dark, and the line between her brows was gone, replaced by something I didn't have a name for and didn't dare reach for. "Field no one, husband, forfeit nothing. Tomorrow at the duel, when Yan Zhuo asks you to name your champion and you stand there with nothing, because you're too principled to ask, the ghost of something almost like a smile, I'll answer for myself. Because you didn't spend me, so I get to spend me. That's the difference, and it's the whole difference, and you're going to have to learn to live with the fact that you've just made me want to." And she turned and walked back toward the high house, leaving me standing in the courtyard with 38% of a feeling, and a bloom held on the edge of breaking, and absolutely no idea what I'd just won, except that it was real, and it was hers, freely given, and tomorrow in front of the whole kingdom she was going to prove it with a sword. The duel of claim was held at noon in the Su clan's great training ground, because Yan Zhuo wanted an audience and I wanted witnesses, and for once the man and I agreed on something. Half of Cloudfall turned out. The Su clan lined the walls. A delegation of Goldfall guards stood in their gold silks, already smug, already composing the story they'd carry home. And at the center, on a dais where the contract sat sealed and witnessed in red ink, stood the presiding arbiter, a neutral elder from a third clan, chosen by both sides, the kind of impartial Su lands bought judge had only pretended to be. "The terms are read," the arbiter announced. "A duel of claim, champion against champion, binding under sect law. The challenger, Yan Zhuo of Goldfall, stands as his own champion." Yan stepped forward into the ring, rolling his shoulders, golden kai already shimmering off him like heat off a road, grinning at the crowd. "The respondent, Jiang Mu of the Su clan, will now name his champion." This was the moment. Every eye in the training ground swung to me, the doormat, standing at the edge of the ring with no sword, no power, and as far as anyone watching knew, no one in the world willing to die for him. I walked to the line. I didn't name anyone. I just stood there, empty-handed, chin up, ready to take the loss on my feet, exactly as I'd told her I would. "Name your champion, Stain," Yan called, delighted, savoring it. "Or is the great contract going to be won by a forfeit? Shall I just collect the widow now and save us the... He names me." The voice came from the high seat, and it cut through the training ground like the first crack of a frozen lake breaking, and 1,000 people stopped breathing at once. Su Wonking rose. She came down from the dais without hurry, drawing her pale longsword as she walked, frost blooming along its edge with a sound like a held breath. And she stepped into the ring beside me, the doormat, in front of the entire kingdom, and faced Yan Zhuo with gray eyes gone winter. "My husband names me as his champion," she said, clear and carrying, so no soul in that ground could pretend not to have heard. "And I accept. Of my own word, freely given." Her gaze flicked to me, one heartbeat, and there was something in it I would carry for the rest of a very long life. Because he is the first person in 8 years who refused to ask. The system detonated behind my eyes. Milestone, Su Wonking claims you publicly, of her own free will, before the kingdom. Regard, 38% to 51%. +2 boons, +50 devotion. Shared peril armed. A milestone earned protecting or being protected pays double. The bloom, tier 4, magnetic. 51%, past halfway. The 4th tier of the bloom rolled through me in front of everyone, and I felt this borrowed body cross some threshold the system could only label magnetic, not handsome in a thunderclap, but a presence the whole ground turned toward without deciding to, the doormat becoming, in plain sight, a man it cost something to look away from. And I watched it land on Yan Zhuo of all people, watched his certainty stumble a second time as he looked at the stain, and found, inconveniently, a man. But Yan's certainty had somewhere much worse to go in about 30 seconds, and it had nothing to do with me. You'd fight your own suitor's duel. He laughed, recovering, turning his contempt on her now. For him, clan head, this is beneath you. I came to win you. I didn't expect you to throw yourself at my sword, to defend a fence post's pride. Fine, I'll be gentle. I'll only humble you enough to, she moved. I've tried since to describe what it's like to watch Sue Wonking fight someone she's decided to make a point of, and the closest I've come is this. It was like watching a strong man punch the weather. Yanjuo was a genuine prodigy, pillar late stage, a once-in-a-decade talent, and he came at her fast and golden and certain, and she stepped around his first strike like it was a slow letter she'd already read, and his second she simply wasn't where it landed. And on the third exchange, her pale blade kissed the side of his throat and stopped, frost crackling across his skin, his own golden kai guttering against the cold like a candle in a draft. The training ground understood, in one held breath, that the only reason Yan Zhuo's head was still attached to Yan Zhuo was that my wife had decided, for the moment, to leave it there. The claim is settled, Sue Wonking said, not even breathing hard, her sword at his throat and frost feathering up his jaw. By strength. The only law there is. She let the words hang, his own creed turned in his mouth. You will renounce the claim. You will leave Cloudfall. You will not return. And you will tell your sect that the Sue heir's marriage is not a mistake to be corrected. A pause, and her gray eyes came just once to me, quick, like she couldn't help it. It was the best decision my father ever made. I felt that land somewhere the system doesn't have a meter for. Yan Zhuo renounced the claim. He had to, the contract was airtight. The arbiter declared it witnessed and binding, and a man with a frost-rimed blade at his throat in front of his own sex guards does not negotiate. We didn't kill him. I talked Wonking down from it with a logic that was half mercy and half lawyer. A dead Goldfall heir brings the whole sect down on us. But a humiliated one who signed and lost in public brings us only a grudge and a debt. So he left a second time, alive, ruined, furious, his gold silks looking suddenly like a costume, his guards composing a very different story than the one they'd planned. The crowd roared. The Sue clan, who had married this woman to a punchline, watched their clan head sheath a frost-bright sword having fought for the punchline's honor, and the gossip of Cloudfall turned over completely in the space of a single noon. I should have been savoring it. I was, mostly. But I've learned to watch the loser of a fight more carefully than the winner, because winners celebrate and losers plan. And as the training ground erupted, my eyes found Aunt Sue Lan at the edge of the Sue delegation, and she wasn't pale, and she wasn't furious, and she wasn't even surprised. She was watching me and Wonking stand together in the ring, the husband and the clan head, the marriage made suddenly, publicly, immovably real. And her sour mouth was doing something almost like a smile, the patient expression of a woman who has just watched her enemies fortify exactly the wall she already knows how to go around. And then, quietly, while the whole clan cheered, Aunt Sue Lan turned and slipped away from the celebration, toward the records hall, with the unhurried purpose of someone who has stopped trying to break a marriage by force, and has just decided to prove on paper that it was never a marriage at all. I didn't know that yet. I only knew the shape of the dread that went through me watching her go. You're not celebrating, Wonking murmured, appearing at my side, the warmth meter glowing high and steady, and for once unhidden. Your aunt just lost in front of everyone, I said, watching the door Sue Lan had vanished through, and she looked happy about it. That's never good. I made myself smile for the crowd for her. But it can wait an hour. You just fought a Goldfall prodigy to a standstill for the family doormat. Let me enjoy being your fence post for 1 full hour before I go find out what she's riding. I should have been savoring it. I was, mostly. But I've learned to watch the loser of a fight more carefully than the winner, because winners celebrate and losers plan. And as the training ground erupted, my eyes found Aunt Sue Lan at the edge of the Sue delegation, and she wasn't pale, and she wasn't furious, and she wasn't even surprised. She was watching me and Wonking stand together in the ring, the husband and the clan head, the marriage made suddenly, publicly, immovably real. And her sour mouth was doing something almost like a smile, the patient expression of a woman who has just watched her enemies fortify exactly the wall she already knows how to go around. And then, quietly, while the whole clan cheered, Aunt Sulan turned and slipped away from the celebration, toward the records hall, with the unhurried purpose of someone who has stopped trying to break a marriage by force, and has just decided to prove on paper that it was never a marriage at all. I didn't know that yet. I only knew the shape of the dread that went through me watching her go. "You're not celebrating," Wonking murmured, appearing at my side, the warmth meter glowing high and steady and for once unhidden. "Your aunt just lost in front of everyone," I said, watching the door Su Lan had vanished through, and she looked happy about it. "That's never good." I made myself smile for the crowd for her. "But it can wait an hour. You just fought a Goldfall prodigy to a standstill for the family doormat. Let me enjoy being your fence post for 1 full hour before I go find out what she's riding." She found me in the eastern courtyard after dark, which had become our place without either of us ever saying so, and she didn't lead with small talk because she never did. "3 weeks ago," Su Wonking said, "you were furniture. You couldn't meet my eyes. You ate last and stood at the back and let a clan full of fools treat you like a chair." She stood very straight in the lantern light, sword at her hip, studying me the way she studied an opening in a duel. "Now you talk a council out of selling me. You bait a Goldfall prodigy into a contract he can't escape. You know clan law better than the elders who wrote it down, and you—" She stopped, and I watched her choose the safe word and discard it because she was too honest for the safe word. "You don't look like him anymore. Like the man my father made me marry. You look like someone else is wearing him." The warmth meter trembled in the corner of my sight, and her voice dropped, and the question under all the other questions finally came out. "What are you, Jiang Mu?" And there it was, the moment every man with a secret dreads, and every man who's falling dreads worse, because I could lie to her and stay safe, or give her something true and find out what it cost. I didn't get to answer, because Read the Room had been quietly flagging something at the edge of the courtyard for the last 2 minutes. A warmth meter where there should have been none. A person's heartbeat behind the plum tree where no person should be, and I'd been waiting for the right moment to mention it. "I'll tell you what I am," I said, holding her gray gaze, and then I tipped my head very slightly toward the dark behind the plum tree, but not in a courtyard where your aunt keeps a man listening at the wall. Starting with the fact that there's one back there right now. Su Wonking went very, very still. And then her hand drifted to her sword, and the temperature in the courtyard dropped about 10 degrees. And from behind the plum tree came the sound of a man realizing, far too late, that he had taken a job that required hiding from a gold-core sword saint in her own home. He folded before she'd drawn the blade an inch. People do around Wonking. The threat of her is more efficient than most people's violence. He was one of Su Lan's, a records runner, and on his knees with frost feathering toward his throat, he gave us everything fast, the way the cornered always do, and what he gave us turned my clean, triumphant noon into something cold. Su Lan had stopped trying to break the marriage. She'd upgraded, she was going to delete it. Here's the shape of it, because the shape was the whole danger. She couldn't annul the marriage that took Wonking's word, and Wonking would never give it, so she wasn't going to annul it. She'd filed a petition with the Cloudfall magistrate to rule the marriage void from the start, not dissolved, which Wonking could block, but void, never valid, a clerical nothing, on the grounds that I, a man with no name, no lineage, and no recorded cultivation, had never been a lawful party to a clan head's death vow in the first place. Strike the marriage retroactively, and it had never existed. And here was the part that made it a knife at Wonking's throat as much as mine. By the old clan law, the heir's seat could be held only by a member whose household was secured by a union of standing. For 8 years, the joke marriage had been the technicality keeping Wonking in her father's chair. Delete the marriage, and her household had never been secured, and an unsecured heir couldn't hold the seat, and it would fall to the senior elder of standing. To Su Lan, "She's not after you," Wonking said slowly, reading it as fast as I had, her runner forgotten on the flagstones. "She's after the seat. You're just the loose thread she pulls to unravel it. And the magistrate?" I asked the runner. He swallowed, paid Lord. Months ago, the hearing's in 3 days. The elders are split. Half of them would rather have Elder Su Lan in the seat than a clan head married to A. He caught himself, looked at the sword, didn't finish. To a nobody, I said for him easily because I was used to it and because the word was about to matter. It's fine. Wonking sent the runner to be held, not harmed, held, because a witness is worth more than a corpse. A thing I was relieved to find she'd already learned from me. And then the courtyard was quiet again, and she turned back to me, and the question was still there between us, sharpened now by everything the runner had said. You were about to tell me what you are, so I did. Not all of it, not the system, not yet. Some truths you have to earn the standing to land, and I wasn't there. But I gave her the true part, the part I could give clean, and I gave it looking her in the eye so she could see with whatever read the room she had of her own that I meant every word. I'm a man who got a second chance he didn't earn and decided not to waste it being the joke, I said. That's the truest thing about me, and everything else grows out of it. I was something before, somewhere else, in another life, it doesn't matter where. I was a man who read people and contracts for a living, who knew where the soft spot in any deal was. And then I woke up here in this body at the bottom of everything, married to a woman so far above me it was a punchline, and I had a choice. Be the doormat the body came with, or use the one thing I brought with me. I held her gaze. I use it for you now. The reading, the law, the contracts, all of it points one direction, and it's you. Not the seat, not the clan. You, that's what I am, wonking. A man who decided to deserve you and is still a long way from it, and isn't going to stop. The warmth meter and the frost meter did something at once that I'd only seen once before. The night I refused to use her, the frost cracking, the warmth rising up through the gap. But the system didn't ring. Not yet, because this wasn't the milestone. This was the setup for one. And the system, I was learning, could tell the difference between a man telling a truth and a woman finally choosing to believe one. 3 days, Su Wonking said quietly. A bought magistrate, an airtight petition. Half my own counsel against me. She looked at me, and there was something almost like dark humor in it now, the gallows kind I recognized from my own face. Tell me you have a loose thread, husband. Tell me there's a flaw. There's always a flaw, I said. Your aunt built this whole petition on one claim, that your father didn't know what he was doing when he married you to a nobody. Their dying clan head of sound mind named a specific man in a binding death vow by accident. I felt the old click start, the loose thread showing itself in the dark. Which means before I can break it, I need to know something only you know. Something you've never told the clan or the elders or the man I used to be. I held her gaze. Why did your father do it, wonking? Why marry his generational genius daughter to a man with nothing? Because Su Lan's whole case dies the moment we can prove it wasn't an accident, and you're the only person alive who knows whether it was. For a long moment, I thought she wouldn't answer. The frost meter trembled on an edge, not the edge of attraction this time, something older and more guarded, a door she'd kept shut for 8 years. Then Su Wonking took a breath and looked at me like a woman deciding to set down a weight she'd carried alone since she was 19 and said, "Come inside. To my study, where Su Lan's listeners can't reach. And I'll tell you the thing my father made me promise never to tell anyone, because I think, husband, you might be the reason he made me promise it. Which means before I can break it, I need to know something only you know. Something you've never told the clan or the elders or the man I used to be." I held her gaze. Why did your father do it, wonking? Why marry his generational genius daughter to a man with nothing? Because Su Lan's whole case dies the moment we can prove it wasn't an accident, and you're the only person alive who knows whether it was. For a long moment, I thought she wouldn't answer. The frost meter trembled on an edge, not the edge of attraction this time, something older and more guarded, a door she'd kept shut for 8 years. Then Su Wonking took a breath and looked at me like a woman deciding to set down a weight she'd carried alone since she was 19 and said, "Come inside. To my study, where Su Lan's listeners can't reach. And I'll tell you the thing my father made me promise never to tell anyone, because I think, husband, You might be the reason he made me promise it. Her study was the one room in the compound her aunt's listeners couldn't reach, warded, private. The desk stacked with the clan's accounts, and a single cold cup of tea she'd forgotten to drink. She'd never let me pass that door before. Tonight she closed it behind us, and stood with her back to it for a moment, gathering something, and then she told me the secret she'd carried alone for 8 years. There is no Jiang debt, Su Wonking said. My father didn't owe your family anything. There was no old promise, no life saved, no bond between the houses. He made it up. All of it. The story the whole clan believes, that he honored an ancient debt by marrying me to the Jiang boy. He invented it on his deathbed, in front of witnesses, so the marriage would have a reason no one could question. I said nothing. You don't interrupt a person setting down a weight that heavy. He was dying, she went on, and her voice was steady in the way I'd learned meant the opposite. Fast. A cultivation injury that the elders couldn't heal, and the sects wouldn't, not for a clan as small as we'd become. And he knew that the day he died, the council would marry me off within the year to whatever sect bid highest. I was 19. I was already the finest sword talent in 3 generations. To them I wasn't a daughter, I was an asset, the best card the Su clan had left to play, and they would play me the moment he wasn't there to stop them. Her jaw tightened. Goldfall would have come then, 8 years early, or worse. Some great sect would have bought me and absorbed our clan, and I would have spent my life as a prize in someone else's house, my children someone else's heirs, the Su name swallowed whole. So he married you to someone who couldn't sell you, I said quietly, the shape of it coming clear. He married me to a nobody. She looked at me and her gray eyes were fierce and bright, on purpose. The lowest live-in husband he could find. No sect, no name, no power, no faction that could ever use the connection. Because a husband with nothing was the only husband who could never become a leash. No sect would ally with us to reach a doormat's wife. No power could be threatened into trading me. Because I was already spoken for by a death vow no superstitious clan would dare break. He didn't marry me to Jiang Mu to honor a debt. He married me to Jiang Mu to protect me, to make me worthless on the marriage market so I could be free of it. The most useless husband in Yunju was the strongest wall he could build around his daughter with his last breath. The lawyer in me understood it instantly and completely, and the rest of me was quiet with something else. It was, I thought, one of the most ruthless and loving things I'd ever heard a man do. He'd spent his daughter's reputation to buy her freedom. He'd made her a joke so no one could make her a prize. He told me at the end, she said, and now her voice did waver just once. He said, better a free woman married to a fool than a prize married to a wolf. Hold the seat, wait. Wait for someone who chooses you instead of using you. And when he comes, then it's yours, all of it, free and clear. But until then, hold, she drew a breath. So I held 8 years. I watched a fool drool through banquets and stand at the back and flinch from his own shadow. And I thought my father, for all his wisdom, had simply gotten it wrong at the end. Picked badly. That there was no one coming, and the fool was just a fool, and the wall he'd built around me was also a cage. Her eyes came up to mine. And then 3 weeks ago the fool stood up, and started winning, and stopped being a fool, and started looking at me like the thing my father said to wait for. The system rang. Soft this time, like it knew not to interrupt. Milestone, Su Wonking trusts you with the secret she has guarded for 8 years. Regard, 51% to 64%. +2 boons +60 devotion realm. Kai Si to pillar hidden. The bloom tier 5. I felt the realm turn over in me. Quiet as a key, pillar now, 3 rungs hidden under a body temper label. The warm rush of 2 boons settling into bone. And the 5th tier of the bloom moved through this borrowed body and settled at another degree into the man it was becoming. But I barely noticed any of it because I was looking at her, and I had just understood something that mattered more than realms. Your father didn't pick wrong, I said. He bet that one day the nobody he chose would decide to deserve you. He just died before he got to see it pay out. I stepped toward her, one step, which between us was its own small earthquake now. I can't speak for the man who came before me, the one who flinched. He had his reasons. This is a hard world, and he was given a hard hand. I held her gaze, and 3 weeks of bloom and one true night did something to the air in that small, warm room that had nothing to do with any meter. But I'm choosing you. Not the seat, not the clan, you. And in 3 days, I'm going to walk into that magistrate's court and make your aunt hand you your father's chair with her own hands. And then I'm going to keep choosing you every day on purpose until you stop bracing for the day I don't. Sue Wonking, frostflower of Cloudfall, who had not let a single soul close in 8 years, looked at me across that small room for a long, long moment, and the frost meter didn't just thaw. It cracked all the way through. Her hand came up, hesitant, which on her was a tectonic event, and stopped a breath from my jaw, confirming the change in my face was real and not a trick of the lamplight, and her voice, when it came, had no frost left in it at all. "Oh, husband," she said. And it wasn't flat, and it wasn't a title, and for one suspended moment in that warded little room, two people who had every reason in the world to keep a careful distance simply, finally, didn't. And then, because this is the kind of world it is, and the kind of luck I have, a sound came from the dark compound outside. Not a listener this time. A voice, low and venomous, carried on the night air from the far colonnade where Aunt Sue Lan thought no warded study could hear her, to a messenger I couldn't see. "The magistrates bought the petitions airtight," Sue Lan was saying. "But the girl is stubborn and the husband's gotten clever, and I no longer trust the court to finish it cleanly." A pause, a sip of something. "So we hedge." Yan Zhuo went home wanting his pride back. The death vow has one other way to break that no magistrate can argue with. Send word to Goldfall. Tell the young master that if the husband simply dies. Before the hearing, the widow is free by law and grateful and his. The paper-cut smile was audible in the dark. And husbands like that one, nobody, no sect, no one to answer to, husbands like that die all the time. Her hand came up, hesitant, which on her was a tectonic event, and stopped a breath from my jaw, confirming the change in my face was real and not a trick of the lamplight, and her voice, when it came, had no frost left in it at all. "Oh, husband," she said. And it wasn't flat, and it wasn't a title, and for one suspended moment in that warded little room, two people who had every reason in the world to keep a careful distance simply, finally, didn't. And then, because this is the kind of world it is, and the kind of luck I have, a sound came from the dark compound outside. Not a listener this time. A voice, low and venomous, carried on the night air from the far colonnade where Aunt Sue Lan thought no warded study could hear her, to a messenger I couldn't see. "The magistrates bought the petitions airtight," Sue Lan was saying. "But the girl is stubborn and the husband's gotten clever, and I no longer trust the court to finish it cleanly." A pause, a sip of something. "So we hedge." Yan Zhuo went home wanting his pride back. The death vow has one other way to break that no magistrate can argue with. Send word to Goldfall. Tell the young master that if the husband simply dies. Before the hearing, the widow is free by law and grateful and his. The paper-cut smile was audible in the dark. And husbands like that one, nobody, no sect, no one to answer to, husbands like that die all the time. Most men, on overhearing a plot to murder them, would feel fear. I felt the cold, clean click of a case coming together, because Aunt Sue Lan had just made the same mistake every overconfident party makes eventually. She'd told me her whole strategy. The petition and the knife. And a man who knows both prongs of a trap doesn't have to dodge. He can stand exactly where the trap is and let it close on the hand that set it. She just gave us everything. I told Wonking, low, the two of us standing in the dark of the warded study with the venom of her aunt's voice still hanging in the night air outside. The petitions her front, the assassinations her hedge. She thinks one of them has to land before the hearing. I felt myself starting, against all the circumstances, to smile. Which means all we have to do is survive the knife and break the petition. And she spent every move she has, in public, on the record, where the elder council can see her reach for both. "Survive the knife," Wonking repeated dryly. "You make it sound like an errand, It's the part you're better at than anyone alive. I'll handle the paper. You handle anyone who comes over the wall. I turned to the desk, pulled the petition toward me. She'd gotten a copy. Of course she had. And there it was, the loose thread, glowing in the dark of the document the way it always does once you know where to look. And the paper's already done wonking. Look, her entire case rests on one claim, that the marriage is void because your father didn't knowingly bind you to a lawful party. A dying clan head of sound mind named a specific man in a binding death vow by accident, like a fool. Yes, she said, watching me. And you can't inherit a man's authority by proving in open court that the man was incompetent. I laid it out the way I'd lay it for a judge, slow, each piece clicking into the next. Su Lan is about to stand before the magistrate and argue that the late clan head, her own brother, the man whose authority she's claiming to inherit when the seat falls to her, was not of sound mind when he made his final binding decree. That his death vow doesn't count because he didn't know what he was doing. I looked up. But if his death vow is void for incompetence, wonking, then so is every other thing he decreed on his deathbed, including the decree that named Su Lan as senior elder of standing in the first place. She cannot argue your father was a fool whose dying words don't bind, and then claim a seat that only falls to her because of his dying words. She has to choose. Either the death vow stands, and your marriage is valid and she loses, or the death vow is void, and her own standing evaporates with it and she loses. There is no version where the petition wins her the seat. It's a noose she's tying for her own neck and calling it a net for yours. The study was quiet. Wonking read it once more over my shoulder, her clan head mind turning it the way mine had, and I watched her find the same airtight, beautiful, self-defeating shape I'd found. She doesn't see it, she said slowly, because she's so certain the law is on her side that she never read what the law would cost her to use. They never do. People in love with their own advantage stop reading at the part where they win. I set the petition down. We don't even have to stop the hearing. We want the hearing. We let her stand up in front of the magistrate and the council and spring her own trap on herself, in public, where every elder who's been on the fence sees exactly who she is and exactly what her cleverness is worth. 3 days, we just have to live to attend. And that, the we of it, the two of us bent over the same problem in a warded room, the clan head and the husband who'd been a joke a month ago. That was the moment I understood part of my life had quietly ended and another had begun. I wasn't surviving the Sioux clan anymore. I was running a campaign inside it, with the most powerful woman in Cloudfall as my partner instead of my judge, and the warmth meter glowing steady and unhidden in the corner of my sight told me she felt the shift too. The next 2 days we built. Not walls, trust. I went to Elder Y and the council members who'd started to turn, and I didn't ask them to take sides. I just showed them the petition and let them read it, and let them arrive on their own at the noose Su Lan had tied. By the second evening, the council that had been split down the middle was quietly, grimly united behind their clan head, not because I'd argued them there, but because nothing makes a wavering house loyal like watching one of its own try to burn it down for a chair. Even Elder Fang, sour to the last, audited the petition's claims against the clan rolls unasked, and reported the inconsistencies to the council in his flat, incorruptible voice, and that was worth more than any speech I could have made. Su Heng started following me around. Not menacing now, guarding in his clumsy way, a young bull who decided the doormat was his to protect, and was too proud to say so. Auntie Bo fed me warm meals openly in the kitchen, where everyone could see. The clan that had married wonking to a punchline was, arc by arc, becoming a clan that stood behind the both of us. And the system, quiet through all of it, rang once at the end of the second day, soft and almost approving. The husband is no longer the clan's joke. He is becoming its spine. On the third night, the new moon, the hearing at dawn, the clan gathered in the great hall for a quiet assembly, the council and the household together, a show of unity before we walked into the magistrate's court as one. Lanterns everywhere, wonking at the high seat and me, for the first time, invited to stand beside it rather than at the back among the furniture. The whole Sioux clan in one warm, lamplit rooms united, ready, the trap laid and the morning one before it came. I should have known. A clan all in one place, lanterns lit, guards relaxed. The night of the new moon when the dark is deepest, that isn't a celebration. It's a target. The lanterns went out all at once. Every flame in the hall snuffed in the same breath, plunging us into the black of a moonless night. And in the half-second before the screaming started, I heard Wonking's chair scrape and felt the temperature drop as her sword cleared its sheath. And then they came over the eastern wall, fast and silent and far above anything the relaxed house guard could stop, gold silks traded for the gray of killers. A dozen blades pouring into the dark hall full of unarmed clan. Sulan hadn't waited for the court after all. The hedge had become the play. And at the center of the killers, where the deepest dark was, a thin old man with milky blind eyes lifted a censer of pale smoke and pointed it, not at Wonking, not at me, but at the space between us, and rasped a single word that I didn't understand yet, and would spend the rest of the night and a good part of my life learning the price of. There, the whole Sioux clan in one warm, lamplit rooms united, ready, the trap laid and the morning one before it came. I should have known. A clan all in one place, lanterns lit, guards relaxed. The night of the new moon when the dark is deepest, that isn't a celebration. It's a target. The lanterns went out all at once. Every flame in the hall snuffed in the same breath, plunging us into the black of a moonless night. And in the half-second before the screaming started, I heard Wonking's chair scrape and felt the temperature drop as her sword cleared its sheath. And then they came over the eastern wall, fast and silent and far above anything the relaxed house guard could stop, gold silks traded for the gray of killers. A dozen blades pouring into the dark hall full of unarmed clan. Sulan hadn't waited for the court after all. The hedge had become the play. And at the center of the killers, where the deepest dark was, a thin old man with milky blind eyes lifted a censer of pale smoke and pointed it, not at Wonking, not at me, but at the space between us, and rasped a single word that I didn't understand yet, and would spend the rest of the night and a good part of my life learning the price of. There,